have to put the entire trilogy, the before trilogy, as my masterpiece because they are in conversation with each other. It's one long piece that was made, and it's a miracle to me that a thing like this happened. I don't think it was intended when the first one came out, and the fact that these people could meet up again after regular intervals of I want to say it's like 8 years or 10 years, something like
Yeah,
that.
roughly. I think it's 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And just catch each other and not make a mockery because it'll be so easy to say, oh, let's just recreate the magic that was in the first movie. And
Mm-hmm.
that just wouldn't work. We see that all the time. Instead, it's just really honest representation of where are Celine and Ilna's character, where are they at in their life today, and make it interesting and relevant for where they are. And it's just kind of a miracle that they were able to recreate this. And the fun part, or how you take it, is that depending on where you are as an audience in your life, you can go back to these movies and just see different versions of yourself. And it sort of becomes such a meta text in my mind and whoever I talk to about these movies, is that at a given point you might identify with this version of Jesse versus the other, and that's just so cool. And that's what you get when you put authentic life and its progression on screen that way. And I don't know, I'm very curious to hear if you thought about this, and how will this relationship go? Because I, like you, was a romantic, still am, that, oh, these people definitely met up again. And I love how before Sunset picks up, where actually one of them didn't show up and the other
Right.
one did. Spoiler alert
Mm-hmm.
if you've not seen these movies. And then how that connection grows, and you're still not sure if something's going to happen after that. And then of course with Before Midnight, you see that's the end of the journey, where this has been a full life, and like a lot of relationships, some things have gone right and some things haven't. And you can't really blame it anything or point a finger at that, oh, you should have never pursued this. The truth is that I'm glad they pursued this, for the life that this whole experience offered to them. Just that one train ride, everything goes back to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't turn out very well, as a lot of things don't turn out very well in life. But it's not so black and white, I think, because a lot of things also did turn out well. They got their careers going, and the family that they created, and none of that would have happened if they had not, bit the bullet and done this. So it's just very life to me. What's your take on the remaining two movies, but also your own kind of interpretation of what would happen with these characters over time?
Yeah, so I had not seen any of these films until the podcast. So we
Oh,
talked about Before Sunrise for the love episode, and then Before Sunset was our acting episode, and now you're
yep.
bringing in Midnight on the Linklater piece. So I this is the first time I'd seen the final film. I waited. I figured this would come up at some point again, so I might as well wait. And yeah, I think this as a trilogy, and I get, yeah, you bend to the rules in this, but I'll allow it. I think it makes sense for this. It is very unique in that it really does cover, I think, all the stages of a relationship over
Yep.
time. Like the first movie is that meet cute. And the second movie I really do feel is that you as an audience member, and maybe them too, realizing like this is true love. Like they're
Yeah.
actually in love. This wasn't just like a fun, 24-hour
Luke.
thing. This is real. And then the third movie is what a relationship really means in the sense of commitment to one's life and
Right.
the choices you make and how that helps or hurts the relationship. And it's complicated. Complicated is the wrong word. It's like
It's reality.
it's reality, right? There's goods and there's bads, but
Mhm.
that's what happens when you commit your life to someone. And that,
Mhm.
I think the third movie, even though personally I think it's the weakest one of the three, it's not fun to sit there and watch someone argue
No,
for
it's a
20
hard
minutes. I don't
watch.
I don't need to see that. Like it's just
No.
not as fun. But I think it's an important piece of it. Of like, okay, now this is reality. However, there is still, I find that the final scenes of the film, he's reading this fake letter that's from the
Mhm.
future, talking about what they're gonna do that night. She says some comment about like, oh yeah, we're about to have like a great night or something. And that's the
Mhm.
last line, which I think does mean that, yeah, they go through problems and they've gotten this big fight. And she even said, like, maybe I don't love you anymore, but that the rest of their life is still gonna be great. So I
Yep.
still I still think it is a positive ending, but it is that truthful part of like, okay, now they're in a relationship and what is that actually like? And there's pluses and minuses to that. So that is what I like about this movie. I think it's a good treatise on what love you might think it is, how it actually is, and what those feelings are when you're first kind of like meeting someone to then falling in love to being in an actual relationship. I think this perfectly captures that through these characters, that they also still just like pick up right where they left off. Like you believe that they're, Julie and Ethan are these people. There's truth to this, and the way that they fight, the way that they recall things, it feels natural. Though I will say, I think in the thing that made also the third one Before Midnight not as good, like some of these discussions felt a little false to me, and that like you've been married for X number of years and now you're talking about this. Like I know I'm like, okay, you would have had this conversation before. Like this feels like forced for the audience, whereas those other two didn't, because they hadn't seen each other either at all or in 8 years. But that being said, I still think it was an important kind of ender to the trilogy, and I think this is going to be a very is an important trilogy in cinema. I think it really is, and something no one else could have pulled off.
Yeah, exactly. To that last point you made, I thought about that too. That is this just for the movie or is it real? But then I agree with what you said. But the flip side of that is that you also have to look at who these people are, And of course, the movie is telling the story of relationship and love, but it's also telling the story and the arc of one's personal growth and journey. Just these two people as individuals, you know? As philosophical and what have you they can be, they're also a little bit divorced from reality. They both live in their own dreamlands, outside of each other. So as much as their communication is great in some ways, with the banter and the one-upping each other and the romance of it and the push and pull that we see in the first two movies, there's also maybe not as great of a communication line between the two, because they often do not communicate about the things that matter. That's in the DNA of their relationship and who they are as people. The fact that they missed each other in the second movie when they said is kind of proof of that, right? That they didn't quite get the same level, even though they were thinking about it. I think it's kind of clever. I keep thinking that when the three of them got together, Richard, Ethan Hawke, and Julie Delpy, like probably they would push each other. What would Celine and Jesse do? I think that sort of is the core of this, because it's so tempting to just make this about the relationship and the love, but it has to come from a place of the truth of these people. And I think that's pretty magical.
That's definitely true too. And one other thing I'll say, because we've been refer to this as a trilogy, and it is a trilogy, but thinking back on each of these individual films, I think you could watch each one 100%. On its own, and you can watch Before Midnight having never seen the other two, and you kind of get within the first 10 minutes what's going on, and there still is enough of an arc within that film that is self-contained.
Yeah.
And I think that is also something that is hard sometimes with trilogies, especially once you get into the second and third one. Like, how connected are they? And they feel like three very individual statements on relationships and love and human connections. But then when you put them all together, it becomes even stronger. But even on their own, I do think these movies work incredibly well. Not that I'd recommend, probably, if listeners haven't seen any of them, start with the first one. I personally think the second one is my favorite out of all of them, because it's the most romantic one. But
consensus.
But I think you can start with the first one, and then if it grabs you, then check out the other two. But you don't have to either. I think these movies, if you stumble upon the second one and just watch that and never watch any of the other ones, I think you still get a full experience, which is something that is cool too.
Yeah. And I guess last thing I want to say is that for Linklater, for me, who's such a master of playing with time and life, I just wanted to have this trilogy represent that. Because in my mind, he will always go down as that director. He did it with Boyhood. He's doing it again with Merrily We Roll Along, a movie that he's shooting over like 1 billion years. And so I love that this trilogy kind of captures that at its highest level.
I agree. Yeah. Boyhood was another film we covered, I think, on an Oscar episode. And I find that movie not good, like pretty bad for a lot of the things I think worked in this movie in terms of how they handled time. That just didn't work. But it's interesting that he likes playing around with this notion of what passage of time does. Yeah, it's definitely part of that existential questions or whatever that he's always asking himself, like that main character from Slacker way back in the day.
Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.